From the dark depths of infinite space, a ship emerges, out of nowhere, like a shark from the depths of the ocean. We enter the ship in silence before it wakes. Its outdated yet futuristic technology creating nostalgic noise as it enters the debris field of the Nostromo. A Weyland-Yutani cargo opens, taking in an asteroid. The faceless crew crack it open and retrieve something that is wheeled off in the background, as the camera takes us to the rock, with the shape left of the perfect organism. Benjamin Wallfish's score for this entire film is quality. It has hints of all of the past themes for all of the movies in the series, whilst taking things in its own direction, but I love the haunting orchestral vocals that are used in this opening. Setting the film in this time period also allows them to draw from those beautiful sets that we had in the earlier movies before we became too kind of futuristic in a way that was not so believable, and reached a point where it was almost generic. The aesthetic of Alien and Aliens definitely serve for a more intense and unique world, and it absolutely works in this film's favour with some truly beautiful shots throughout. Rain and Andy are introduced on this absolute rock bottom of a home that they're stuck on, where they don't even get sunlight, kept down the economic ladder by Weyland's CEOs without a care for their actual lives. Rain has lost her parents due to the mining conditions on the planet, but she has now reached her quota to allow her to leave the planet. As she's putting in her request, she finds out the quota is increased, as well as being told to subscribe to this channel and like the video, which is a bit weird and felt out of place, but who am I to tell you what to do? We understand that this is just a never-ending cycle. By this point, we know who Weyland-Yutani are, and we know that they are the real antagonists of this series. They're going to keep everyone on this planet in a never-ending cycle that will continue to benefit them for as long as they want. As usual, Weyland-Yutani have crafted this capitalist state that serves no one positively except for the rich, allowing them to get richer. We establish Rain and Andy's sibling relationship, and they are a pair I truly hope to see come back in a sequel. I think Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson are phenomenal in these roles. Andy is an android that Rain's father found and rebuilt in an attempt to give Rain a brother and leave someone behind in the event of his death. And due to this, he's been programmed with awful dad jokes, but his primary directive is to do what's best for Rain. A character who is only there to serve others, which kind of gets twisted on its head later. Despite being an android, we build a lot of care for this character and their relationship. Rain and Andy visit their friends who have a proposition that vitally requires Andy. They know they're never leaving this planet through the system. They've tried that, we've just seen that that's not going to happen. So, they've devised a plan. There is a Weyland-Yutani ship orbiting the planet that has cryopods on them, and with those cryopods, they'd be able to make the trip to Nevada? I don't know, but somewhere nicer, somewhere with a sun. But being on an abandoned Weyland-Yutani ship, they need an android, a synthetic, to open doors. Despite the initial dismissal, Rain agrees. I really like this ragtag team. They're authentically young and annoying in just the right ways. Quite a standard affair of horror movie protagonists. Everyone has believable motivations and relationships. Just a shame that Navarro was certified dead from the start of the marketing campaign. The sequence of leaving the planet is a personal favourite. It's tense and simultaneously a lot of fun. The sound design on every level of this film is quality, and we get the beautiful yet sad view of their home planet being left in the dust of the company. We see another part of this engaging universe that we've seen different sides of across so many movies now. We've seen the rich and we've seen the blue collar workers, but here we have a group of teenagers on the brink of adulthood, desperate not to spend the rest of their lives in this awful place, something that people of that age, of my age, can attest to. You know, I'm in a world where, frankly, I have no idea when I'm going to be able to afford, like, my own home, when I'm going to be able to get out of here. Like, I think a minimum of 40, you know. It's a true example of Weyland's hypocrisy to keep the rich. They get to the location of the ship, but it's not a ship, an abandoned science outpost. Not only that, but the rings are closer than they thought as well. But they're still 36 hours away, so I don't see how it'd ever be an issue. Immediately, we can see some alien isolation influence here, which I'm never going to complain about. I adore it. Ah! You fuck. The vents the lever to open doors, and the entire plot of an abandoned space station and having to make your way from A to B in there. It creates an excellent atmosphere of suspense and creates a brilliant mystery as well, built through shots of the environment and making us question what happened here. After realising they need more fuel for the cryopod since they're kind of half empty, they find another room where there are canisters that use the same fuel as the pods, so of course they pull them out, but not only does Bjorn freeze his fingers off, all the alarms go off, they get locked in. Along with them, the audience realises this is not the room to get locked in, because it was in fact not just any old room, it was housing countless facehuggers. Automatically, the pieces start coming together from the opening scene, obviously which directly connected to the first film. Through experimentation from that point, somehow on this Wayland station, they were able to draw facehuggers from the Xenomorph that they found from the first film, which we actually see the harpoon still stuck through its chest when we do see the remains of that original Xenomorph shortly. We know the company have always wanted to weaponize the Xenomorphs and have wanted to experiment on the aliens, and this is some of the furthest they've got, and it ties into more of the franchise in ways that I really like as we go through, but this is some of the furthest progress they've made, and obviously until that original Xenomorph broke out and caused chaos across the entire outpost, leaving it floating until its inevitable destruction. I would love to see more of what actually happened when that original guy escaped. I think seeing it directly might ruin the intrigue. I don't think I'd want a whole film dedicated to it, but even just more information about the fallout of events after that happened. In a similar way to Alien Isolation, I know obviously we don't have the 14 hours or whatever that game has to explore this. Oh! But I would have liked even just a little bit more to see kind of the panic that ensued afterwards and how it became so derelict, and you know, we get enough of an idea for it to not feel like a plot hole, but I just think it would have been cool. So with the cooling tank removed, the temperature starts to rise and the facehuggers begin to wake up. The way the facehuggers are used in this film is just spectacular. They get a lot of play here, more than other films. Within this sequence, it's great. The tension builds really well as the heat rises and the lights are red. Rain and Navarro are trying to break through, they can't open the door, but they give Andy a new chip because they found an android on the floor outside of this room and figure, okay, this chip surely has the clearance to open this door, so they give it to Andy, put it into Andy, he reboots as the facehuggers begin their attack. The jump scare of the android on the floor is really effective, and I love seeing it in silhouette and shadows. It's really creepy, and I remember when I was watching the film for the first time, I thought, oh, that resembles Ian Holmes quite a bit, that's quite cool. We'll come back to that. The practical effects are really great. Seeing them swim through the water is really eerie. They kind of hit the same fear that spiders do. We get a badass moment of Andy catching one of the facehuggers by its tail before it latches onto Tyler, and now with the clearance, they can leave the room. But because the glass was already smashed on the door, the sheer quantity of facehuggers smash through, and as they try and close the other door that would leave them in safety, one of them slips through the crack and gets to Navarro. Just as scary as ever, having the creature so tightly wrapped around her face. At the same time, Andy has had many features upgraded due to this new chip. He surmises that the half-dead android on the floor might know a bit more of what happened here and what they're dealing with. So now we get to my single biggest problem with the film. Bringing back actors that have passed is always a no-go for me. The Flash is one of the grossest examples of it. It really frustrated me, and I think it's really insulting. I think bringing back ghoulish versions using AI and CGI and whatnot feels morally wrong, and I just don't get the point. I know they said the family were happy with it, and you know, I guess that's not as bad as doing it behind their back, but in my opinion, it just shouldn't be a thing in the first place. It's also worse because the CGI here is just not good. And I don't think it ever will be good, but having it full on in 4K, the uncanny valley, it's awful, and I hate it. I think if you wanted to do something like that, keeping it in shadow and silhouette would have worked. When I initially had the thought that it resembled kind of the outline of Ian Holmes, I thought, oh, I don't mind that. That's a cool little kind of reference of androids looking the same as David and the other one in Covenant. But it doesn't do that. It goes all out and showing him in full 4K view. It's so distracting. especially because he has a decent bit of screen time. Every time he's on screen, it totally takes me out of the film. It's really frustrating because the film is really good at getting you immersed in the atmosphere. This is obviously kind of a wider issue amongst filmmaking at the moment, and all I can say is, please stop. He gives a bit more context about the creature to our protagonists, and Rain wonders if by freezing the tail it'll loosen the grip on Navarro's throat and they can put it off and kill it. Which does work, but they realise that the fact that it had been latched onto her for so long already, it's more likely than not that it finished its job. With Andy's upgrade and his directive of to save Rain, he believes he now has to kill Navarro to prevent the alien's birth that would kill them all. But this idea is the first kind of sign that rears its head that Andy's directive has changed and his motives have maybe been manipulated due to the chip taken from Rook. And as we do find out a bit later, his new directive is not to do what's best for Rain, to do what's best for the company. Navarro gets back to the ship and the chest bursting scene is great. It's always kind of a staple of these movies, I think, and obviously nothing will top that iconic original, but it feels painful. The way the chest kind of cracks open and the sound effects are just brutal, and I love the kind of incorporation of that X-ray kind of machine, and then the scream from Isabella Merced. I'm sorry if I said your name wrong, but it's haunting and it's brilliant, like a top 10 horror scream. The ship crashes into the other side of the station. Navarro is dead. Kay and Bjorn are separated from Rain, Andy and Tyler. This entire sequence is incredibly well done. It's tense, it truly feels uncertain, and Andy's sudden switch up is upsetting because we get attached to him, and at this point we're not totally in the know about why this has happened. He really kind of gets manipulated into serving a different purpose by those who believe they rightfully own him, and I think there are definitely kind of themes there of racism that it's looking at, but definitely kind of the capitalist Weyland-Yutani that is always a big theme throughout every movie. It carries on similar ideas that the prequels presented with David and how he was almost too human. Here, Andy's more human natures are taken away from him. And for Rain, he's the only family that she has left, so it's even more difficult. Rain and the other two find a corridor taking them straight to where they need, but of course, it's filled with facehuggers. What follows is another great horror sequence cut together with Kay and Bjorn, who find a big sack vagina on the wall. Presumably, this is how aliens begin their nests when there's not like a queen. It seems like a kind of cocoon of sorts. Bjorn goes full guns blazing, not knowing what it is. It's probably not good. It doesn't look great. It's just sticking his like a taser bat on and trying to fry it. It screeches as steam flows out of it until the baton dies. But as they go to leave, a sharp tail points out and catches Bjorn's eye before slashing his eye. He falls to the floor in pain, and acid drips down with some gnarly effects burning away at his skin, revealing the bone until his heart bursts. Some really gnarly effects, and now the big chap is emerging from his cocoon and even more pissed. It's tense, it's scary, it's harsh, and it's a great death scene. And I saw a deleted scene that they almost used, and I like elements of it. I like in the deleted scene how he's kind of lifted in the background, but I think we almost kind of get that a bit later with Tyler's death, and I just think this death is much more effective, to be honest. So the Xenomorph reaches its full form, paying homage to the original reveal in the first film. It looks incredible. I mean, the animatronics used are just absolutely stunning and utilised incredibly effectively. The Xenomorphs have never looked better. Whilst Kay is left to try and open the door on her own, we get some exposition explaining how facehuggers can't see. They find you through sound and heat signature, which is kind of really cool. As much as we could probably guess that, it's nice to kind of hear it, and it's a nice mechanic to get way into this sequence. Build those stakes. So now they have to be incredibly quiet and keep control of their emotions. They can't panic, they can't get goosebumps, you know, they've got to remain level, which is almost impossible when you consider the scenario that they're in. The facehuggers look great as well. Those animatronics are just incredible. But as Kay talks to Tyler over the comms, he clearly gets quite stressed, and we see the goosebumps appear on his arm as his hairs rise too, and it spirals into action and panic as they have to just sprint and hope for the best. Andy nearly shuts Tyler out with the creatures, but they just about make it. Fede Alvarez proves himself continuously to be brilliant at horror set pieces.
And that is what you want for any horror movie, particularly this one. When you read about the experiences of people watching the first Alien, like, were losing their minds. They couldn't believe what they were seeing.
I really think this film nails all the horror elements above all else. There are a lot of moments tonally that are more action orientated and a bit closer to Aliens, but overall I think it's much closer to the original Alien. It's much more of a return to the pure horror that that first film focused on. And he's a master at building stakes for tension and creating just nightmare scenarios. And having these two scenes cut together just make it that much more intense. The Xenomorph is now fully loose. We hear it seemingly searching for Kay, and it feels like an Alien Isolation stealth sequence. I've never been more locked in than right now. This is awful. This is really bad. Andy refuses to open the door because he knows that Alien is waiting so he can get a kill streak instead of just a solo kill. This again shows the Xenomorph's insane intelligence. They are incredibly smart creatures. Upon realizing that the door's not going to be open, it takes Kay. As brutal as it was revealed earlier that Kay's actually pregnant. Its tail drags her away into fucking some other nightmare scenario elsewhere on the station. And this pushes Andy further into helping the company's antagonistic intent with the aliens. As much as we get that it would have killed them all, his passiveness in the moment caused Kay to die, resembling the choice that led Bjorn to hate all synthetics. An android made a decision to seal off a section of the mines in order to save a larger number of people. A purely statistical choice. And that's essentially what we've just seen play out with Andy. He reveals now that his sole goal is now to recover this compound and take it back to the company for further experiments. And this was a major tie-in to the prequels that I did not expect, but a very welcome one, as well as a return from the cue of music from Prometheus. Weyland had been testing on the black goo that we saw in Prometheus and Covenant, a substance that can destroy just matter. It tears it down at a genetic level, but can also kind of go the other way. It's a bit muddy on the origin of the Xenomorphs due to the prequels and kind of different interpretations, but it had something to do with the creation of the first aliens. I know David kind of engineered them, or at least a variation of them. They've been attempting to use it to ensure that humanity can become the dominant species after years of regression. Oh my fuck! Stop doing that. The top hats at the company believe that humans should be referred to as the perfect organism, not these fucking dick-headed aliens. And as always, that means they're willing to fuck with nature itself to get what they want. Rook informs Andy how important this is, so after bringing out the aim assist pulse rifles, which sound incredible by the way, they get ready to make their escape, and the stakes set up nicely. They can't even use their guns. Due to their acid blood, it'd cause a hole in the floor, leading to the complete loss of air and the pressure going, so they're all just sucked out to their instant deaths. So the only hope of having these pulse rifles is that the Xenomorphs will see it as more of a threat, and that's just a big maybe and a big hope. Making their way down to the bottom floor is now completely an alien nest. Busy little creatures with the blue mist and all. It's a welcome return. Only for them to find Kay just about hanging on to life. They take her off the wall in an effort to save her life as she's losing so much blood and any second away from dying. Andy presents using the Prometheus goo, but Rain smartly decides not to inject it because it's some alien ominous black goo. You don't fucking want to put that in you. Assuming that it'd be a safer bet to help Kay back to their ship and putting her in the cryopod, which would freeze her until they reach their destination where they can get actual help. Just as they're preparing to leave, a Xenomorph stabs Tyler, dragging him up to the swarm. And throughout this scene, there's a few moments that I always love in horror, where you see stuff happening in the background. Hereditary did it in a spine-chilling moment for me, where we see Toni Collette's character like in the corner. It's awful because it is just that sense of they could be anywhere, everywhere, and it's something that the first film did really well, showcasing how perfect it is at hunting because it can blend into kind of its surroundings. That final moment in the original where it just looks like it's one of the pipes on the ship. I wish we'd had more of that. That was an element of that first film that I love and wish could have been expanded on. After the Xenomorphs lift Tyler up, we get a shot of just a swarm of them sprinting at him. It's in a similar vein as to when we saw all the facehuggers earlier sprinting after them, except now they're all fully formed and it's so much worse. Rain ends up sending Kay off on her own to get to the ship because Andy had been hit by one of the Xenomorphs, and now he's alone, struggling and seizing on the floor, as he did earlier when he got beaten up by some kids on their home planet. She risks getting her brother back, despite Andy's initial hesitance and despite the manipulation that he's been through throughout the story, but she's able to swap the chip and gets Andy back through that compassion, through that sacrifice to be there for someone that she cares about. She gets him back. New issue though, the Xenomorphs have now caught up to them because they've spent that time. They managed to keep them at bay briefly with the pulse rifles, but it's not too long before they realise Rain and Andy aren't actually a threat. Rook is still trying to play into everything and make sure the goo gets off the base and to the company, but Rain remembers the gravity purge. If that was on and they could shoot all the Xenomorphs, the acid wouldn't instantly fall to the floor. It'd give them decent time to get away. So what follows is a great zero-G sequence that again is full of suspense, especially knowing that eventually the gravity purge is going to come back, and even without that, they've got to glide their way through all of the acid anyway without letting it touch them. They manage to do that. A Xenomorph grabs Rain's foot and it sends her flying totally off balance. As they climb the elevator shaft, the alert plays warning us that the gravity purge will be happening soon. Before Rain can grab onto the ladder, she falls. Gravity comes back, and an alien catches her with its tail, and it recreates the iconic shot from Alien 3. I like it. I think it's a cool kind of update. However, at first, when this happened, my first thought was, holy fuck, if this is a good Xenomorph that's just saved her, I'm out. Like entirely. Thankfully, that's not what happened, but it's still an incredibly weird moment. It's the Xeno from the sack, I assume, because it's got electricals in its head. So maybe it's after revenge, or is it trying to hold her to get her impregnated? Either way, it takes so long for it to do anything that Andy has the time to fall down, shooting it to shit, killing it, and then closing it off with a shitty repeat line that I don't even think would have been bad if he didn't say the bitch at the end of it. It's a baffling way to end this otherwise great sequence and stops kind of any kind of tension that we were in the middle of. Just in time, they get to their ship before the station hits the planet's rings below, and it's a quality visual display as this ship explodes. Despite big frustrating forced fan service at the end of an otherwise stellar sequence, this part of the movie was phenomenal. The action was great, with high stakes, practically and emotionally. Rain saved her brother, and despite the removed updated motor functions, he is more than capable of helping his loved ones. And Rain updates his directive, teaching him that he doesn't have to dedicate everything to others, he can also think for himself. Which I know kind of in world there's probably like debate about that because he's a synthetic and whatnot, but you know, it's all fiction, man, so I don't get caught up on that. Rain took a major risk returning for Andy, and she accepted that, and despite the manipulation he went through and in turn hurt others, he is the closest left to family, and that risk paid off in the best way. And now we get to the most unexpected part of the film, and I think the most controversial. I thought the film was about to end, genuinely. After all seems well, the cryopod alarm starts going off, and it reveals Kay seizing violently, and that her pregnancy has accelerated very quickly, to the point where she is now giving birth, spraying an unhealthy amount of blood that is fucking horrific, and I think most of her blood has left her body in this moment. I was not prepared for what was about to ensue at all. Rain attempts to get rid of this egg. I don't really know, but it starts burning with the acid blood, and we realise this is a result of Kay using the Prometheus formula. This Prometheus goo has caused her to give birth to one of the most terrifying, gross things I've ever seen. That being an alien-human hybrid. But not like the other one. This one's good. In the worst way. There's a clear resemblance to the engineers, which I thought was pretty cool. But man, this thing just looks horrible. Like, and I mean it as a compliment. The disproportionate body, the fucked up grin, the movement, the tail that grows, it's a sin against humanity, and it's truly terrifying. Immediately slashes Andy, disposing of him, going to its mother, Kay. killing her in the process, which first of all is genuinely sad, but also so fucked up. This horrible substance that she's producing, and it's really upsetting as well because Kay undoubtedly kind of did this in an attempt to save her child. This kind of brings a lot of the themes of the film full circle in a very deranged way. These characters are all here so they can leave the hole they've grown up in, but to go forward requires sacrifice. The film explores dehumanization through the offspring, as well as Andy being a character weaponized through the aggressively capitalist world of Weyland-Yutani, and the offspring being the result of a desperate attempt for Kay to save her own life, as well as her child's. But it was a panicked, dangerous decision. The inclusion of xenomorph-like characteristics provided from this substance, leading to this human child becoming truly inhumane. Simultaneously though, it's not its fault. As always, it's the company raining down as the true antagonist. Of course, Rain manages to shoot it out of the ship in due time, but the entire sequence is horror focused and amazing. I love it. Seeing it crawl in the shadows in the background, crawling up the ceiling, and it's just great, and I think the jump scares are incredibly well timed and well utilized. As Rain hangs out of the ship and we lose all sound as the air is sucked from the cargo, we just hear her breathing until the offspring comes back face to face, clinging on, until obviously Rain is able to unclip it and send it flying. Incredibly effective, just great stuff. Alien Romulus is a really strange entry to the franchise. Anytime Alvarez is putting his own touch, it's genuinely great. Like the new Facehugger stuff, the offspring, the use of the xenomorphs, the kind of new angle from these younger characters. I think genuinely all great. As I say, he's a master of horror, but there are massive moments dragging it down. I don't know if it was a case of Alvarez being such a big fan of the franchise that he didn't have the restraint, or if the studio wanted to hammer down past throwbacks to remind fans that we're supposed to like these films. Despite some of those glaring issues, I do have a great time here, and it feels like the entire franchise coming together. I love the tone Alvarez creates with some truly excellent horror and action sequences, and Rain and Andy are some brilliant characters, and they're going to be the main pullback for me to come back and see the sequel, which I know they're working on, and I have faith in Alvarez, and I can't wait to see it.